give me a few of your questionable picks that you saw from the first round.
First thing that sticks out to me was the Raiders pick Tyree Wilson.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. He's 6'6", 6'7", long, rangy, but he isn't an edge rusher. And you're in a
Right.
division with Patrick
Much tougher.
Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, if he can kind of get things going now.
Right.
With Sean Payton, you need someone to be that other bookend with Max Crosby. Now, he'll play the run well. That's what he's elite at. But in this league, you got to get after the quarterback. Another guy, Quentin Johnson. A lot of people are infatuated with him. I get it.
Yep.
Again, another guy with crazy measurables. 6'2", runs like a 4'4", something like that.
Kind of in that same spectrum of Tyree Wilson, like huge
Right.
guy, great athlete, but you want to see more refined out of
Exactly.
them, and you don't want to see so much of just one trick, one step type of things, and that's really how I feel about both of those players.
Yep.
As you're,
and then
as
also
you're
on top of that,
mentioning.
he's kind of like, I wouldn't say Mike Williams, but he's Mike Williams-esque.
Right.
I thought the Jordan Addison would have been a perfect spot
That was a pick
him
for
there
me.
to complement Mike Williams, but it is what it is. And then the Lions, and not so much the picks themselves, because I think the players are good. It's just where they went. I think, and maybe we'll talk about this later on with the other superlatives, but those two picks there, not the players themselves, but the picks, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's not even so much necessarily the players, but it's why did they go that position at that spot? And we're going to talk about some reaches a little later, and it might get confusing to some folks, but nonetheless, whether it's questionable, whether it's a reach, we kind of like to differentiate some. So those were some great ones that you mentioned there. Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, going at number 12 was a questionable pick, with the Lions being really, in my opinion, the worst defense in the NFL last year. You go look pass yards, rush yards, points per game. They were in the bottom 5, I want to say, of all of those categories. Jack Campbell, you can understand. I didn't like to see him as the first linebacker off the board. That was Trenton Simpson for me. But I can understand they needed defense. But to go Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think that was a lot because of Bijan Robinson getting taken at 8 by the Falcons, which I had clearly a lot to say last night, and we'll be saying more on the show tonight about it. But those were a couple questionable ones for me. Will McDonald to the Jets. So, of course, we saw Alfred freaking out last night. I think they could have literally went anyone else. I mean, Miles Murphy fell. Nolan Smith falling to 30 is still insane to me. I think, though, Nolan Smith is going to be viewed more of like that linebacker, maybe sliding in as a Micah Parsons, maybe being that, perennial linebacker in the NFL that we could see. But Will McDonald to the Jets was crazy. I think Van Ness at 13 to the Packers was very high as well over plenty of other players. Quentin Johnston, like you mentioned. I'm shocked you didn't say Mozzie Smith to the Cowboys, because, again, before that happens,
you know what?
You don't want to bring it back up. I understand.
No. Here's the thing. I in the other part of the segment of the show, I was going to bring him up. I don't have a problem with them picking him. Again, it's just where they picked him at.
Yeah.
I guess there's a need for the Cowboys up front like that. But I think he's a good talent. So, but the other two guys, or the other guys I mentioned, to me, those are guys that I feel like they're going to almost be irrelevant to me, but we'll talk about that later, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, Bijan, to the Falcons at 8, a little crazy, because you look, the Falcons have never been able, not never, but in recent memory, they don't get after the quarterback well, literally ranking first or like dead last, second to dead last, and then about 10th last in the NFL over the last 3 years in terms of sacks on the opposing quarterback. They could have definitely went defensive line. Notice how the Eagles jump up literally to take Jalen Carter at 9, because they knew, okay, they expected Jalen Carter to go at 7, and it didn't happen. They more than likely expected Jalen Carter to stay in his backyard and be a Falcon from being a Bulldog at number 8. That doesn't happen. So they trade a little bit of a pick, I think, in a 4th round and move up and get him.